Hi, Andrea. Thank you for joining us to talk about better supporting parents for breastfeeding today. Could you please introduce yourself for our audience before we get into our chat?
Ciao, Catalina. I'm Andrea Syms-Brown, and I did say Andrea. Most people know me as Andrea, even though my right name is Andra. I was born and raised in the Caribbean. I practice breastfeeding support here in New York City and globally. I'm an IVCLC, which is a board certified lactation consultant. I've been a board certified lactation consultant for 21 years. And prior to that, I was a baby nurse in New York City for about 10 years. So I'm happy that you have this platform for me to share as much information as I can with your audience today. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So I'd love to start talking about how we can actually better support individuals to meet their breastfeeding goals. And I think we all know that breastfeeding rates are rising, but they're rising unevenly, and there's certainly more that we can do. So what can we do to better support an individual to meet their breastfeeding goals?
It is important for families who are already breastfeeding their babies to discuss these issues with their friends who are pregnant, right? Most times mothers say to me, I had no idea this is how this would be. And I think it's important for us as women to share the reality of what the experience of mothering is like. It is important for a family to be educated in breastfeeding information prior to giving birth. And it really does start with healthcare providers. If you're seeing a midwife, an OBGYN, ask that person that you're seeing for prenatal care to examine your breasts and explain to you and show you the changes if you're not seeing them. Because there are three changes that should occur when you plan to breastfeed. Number one, your breast should get larger, wider across the front. Your areola should get larger as well, and your areola should get darker. So your areola is the circle around your nipple where the skin texture and color is different. If we're not seeing those three changes, it could be a red flag that you may not be able to breastfeed as successfully, but it does not mean that you will not be able to breastfeed your child. So education is key and sharing this knowledge.
So what are the most common barriers that you see for women who struggle with breastfeeding?
Nipple pain, obviously, that's where the baby's mouth is. And mothers are not necessarily educated in the way that I want all mothers to be educated if they choose to breastfeed, and that is that their baby's mouth should actually cover the underside of the areola. The underside is wherever the baby's chin is coming, because it's the tongue that's doing all the work. And people often say to me, I thought it was just supposed to be my nipple. Well, sucking at the nipple creates nipple damage. We want baby to get that areola in baby's mouth. That's the number one thing. But of course, there are so many barriers. From the time you give birth, we say ideally a baby should latch on within an hour of being born. That's not always possible. If mom is not well or the baby is not doing well, there will be a separation. And so having a plan in place for all contingencies is key. And so I come right back to get the education, sign up for a prenatal breastfeeding workshop. I teach that globally. My colleagues do as well. And so there's really no reason not to have that understanding of what needs to happen when your baby is born. And certainly, if you've had breast surgery for any reason, people often say, well, I had implants, or I had a reduction. Is that going to be an issue? My nipple is inverted. Your baby is coming into the world and needs to eat. And your body will step up to that moment and do what it needs to do. The hard part is getting there. And when I say getting there, I mean it's hard to get there in the sense that, when your baby comes, people experience depression, postpartum depression. This goes on for months for some people and it's undiagnosed. So having support once your baby comes is key.
So what kind of support should parents be asking for, and who should they be asking for it from?
Having support is key. And so there are organizations that are there to help, but it starts with you having that chat with your pediatrician, your obstetrician, your midwife, because they can direct you to good quality providers. And if you can't find somebody, go online and go into Google and write, I need a lactation consultant, and you will find several in your neighborhood.
For women who are breastfeeding and returning to work,
Mm.
what kind of concessions should they ask for? from their employers or from their partners or from whoever else.
Oh, that's a big one. Oy, do we really have only 15 minutes? Starting with the partner, what about the single mom who doesn't have a partner, right? How does
Yeah.
she get that kind of concession or support? You know, I I firmly believe that we can do everything. As women, we can do anything and we can do everything, but we do need help. And so if you plan to breastfeed, the minute you're pregnant, you go into HR. If you work for an organization that has a human resources department, go in there and find out what's available. One of the things that I do is I work for companies directly to work with their employees, and I love doing that because it means that from the time that family becomes pregnant or becomes aware of the fact that they have a baby coming, they know they've got support. If you don't have that information, go find it. If you work in a company that does not allow or doesn't have that kind of support, seek it out. Go to the boss and say, well, why do I pump when I come back in 3 months or 6 weeks or however long you have off? There must be a space, even if you have to get, one of those room dividers and put it up facing the wall so that you can stand between the wall and this little room divider and get your milk out. But you're right, the law, I hate to say this, but the laws need to help us help families do better. We can do this. We can do this. It just takes a little more energy than you might have. And late night, instead of being on, reading some book that may not make sense to you, just start searching through your company's fine print what they cover and how they give you that kind of assistance so that you too can have the sort of support that you feel you need.
Yes, and I'll add a couple things here, having returned twice to corporate environments, but also having breastfed both of my children for 12 to 14 months.
Mm.
So that was because my children are very strong-willed. They refused to even taste formula. When I tried with the first one, I thought this is what's gonna work, and then my son was like, "Nope, nope, it's not what we're doing." But it
They
worked
went to the
out for the
police.
better for him. Um,
Genius.
and then because actually I had learned how to exclusively breastfeed while working, pumping and breastfeeding with the first, I didn't actually even think about formula with the second because I already knew how to do it.
There you go.
So because I had to do it the first time, I figured it out. But I found that it helps. Many companies have parent groups. So if you know someone who's recently become a parent in your company, or perhaps you can find someone like that through the parent group, they can actually tell you how they've done it in the company. So they'll already know, because often companies have resources and you can go talk to HR, which is great. But usually they're in different places. So talking to HR, talking to someone who's recently been through it is really helpful. And then I personally found that, I had one person that I would regularly text about these things. Another mom who had actually just been through it, a friend that I've been friends with for a long time, and I could ask her the questions that were really out there at random times, and it was okay. She would get back to me when it made sense for her. If I texted her at 2 in the morning, she'd write me back at 6 in the morning. But it was
Well,
fine. And those two things were so important.
it's
And
true. It's true.
my mother-in-law from India came for 3 months, and she took care of me so that I could take care of the baby. So that made also breastfeeding easier, having someone else, taking care of you and not having to cook or worry about those things.
I often say, register for services. Don't register for stuff because that baby's not going to be naked. I promise you.
Yeah.
People are going to help you pay for a doula, help you pay for an IBCLC, help you pay for the dog walker, and they'll still send a gift in the mail. So register for services. And there are services that are willing to work with families who have, less money. But all mothers from all walks of life need this kind of support and assistance or intervention,
Yes,
help. It
yes.
takes a village.
So what can society do? Because we're not in villages anymore. We have communities, and that is something that I think we need to lean into more. But what can society do as a whole to make it easier for parents to be parents, for mothers to be mothers and be working mothers as well, and succeed in breastfeeding? I mean, within the context of being those things and being able to breastfeed your child.
Laws about public breastfeeding or breastfeeding in public or nursing in public, whatever you want to call it, have to be addressed. I think right now in the US, you have the right as a breastfeeding family to nurse your baby wherever you want to. But it's important for us as members of the public when we see a woman being harassed for breastfeeding her child at a restaurant or on the subway or on the bus to step in and say, hang on, she's got the right, and support her, because it's a very vulnerable act. I mean, if you're eating a sandwich in public, you feel like everybody's looking at you, or is it
Yeah.
just me? No, people talk about it.
No, I have the same thing.
Eating makes us vulnerable. So imagine you're a mother and you're trying to feed your child in public and people are coming at you. And I think that's it. That's it right there. If we can step up and step in and step between a woman who is nursing her child or an individual who is nursing the child and step between them and be literally a protector, I think that goes a long way, because then others see that. And when they're out in the world and they see the same behavior, they will react similarly. It's not fair, I think, for a child to be crying and crying, and because mom feels uncomfortable or unsafe nursing her child, that she has to wait till she gets home or gets to somewhere where she can feel more safe. There's so many answers to this, but it really, the kernel of it begins with us. It begins with every single individual walking around. And now that we're in a pandemic and most of us are inside, it's less of an issue, but that's not always going to be the case, right? And at some point, you got to go out to do something. And so, as I said, there are lots of ways that we can answer this question, but I stick with one thing: be that person to protect that family. And it radiates from there.
What I noticed when I first became a parent on online forums and discussions, which I stopped actually being part of for this reason, is that there's a lot of sort of shaming. There's women who felt bad for either deciding not to breastfeed or not being successful in it, right? They got shamed. And so there's a movement to say breast is best, and then there's a movement to say fed is best. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, we all want to take care of our children, and we all want to be supported in a way that we could breastfeed, that we can reach those goals. We also want to be supported in a way that if we cannot do it, we're not shamed for using formula. I think swap the opinions for support, and then I think people will have better outcomes against their goals.
I don't believe that fed is best. I don't believe that breast is best. I believe support is best.
Yeah.
Because whether you choose to breastfeed your child, whether you have no choice but to breastfeed your child because of religious issues or familial issues or cultural issues, and including those families who choose to use formula or who don't have an easy time breastfeeding and choose to pump and breast and bottle feed their child their own milk, you're still a parent. And the truth is, when your child is 15 and gets in trouble at school, they're not going to sit you down and go, now, how did you feed your child when he or she was a baby? And everybody gets in trouble in their teens. So it's important, I think, to recognize that from my perspective, support is everything. And whatever you want to do as a parent, that's what you get to do. But you're still going to be coming to people like me if you choose to breastfeed, or your pediatrician if you're not breastfeeding, if you're using formula, because you're going to need that support, right? It's not just how you feed your child. It's the support of raising a human being, that we want to be a good person, compassionate, loving, supportive of the people around them. Don't beat yourself up. Manage your expectations. When I say manage your expectations, go into the act of family raising and understand that if you choose to breastfeed, and you're having any difficulties, we have like 8 levels of lactation support. Did you know that?
No,
Did you know that? Yeah,
no, you
8.
didn't.
It's like CLC, CBC. I mean, I looked into it and I realized, wow, there's no excuse. There's peer support through WIC. So everybody who chooses to breastfeed their baby, there's somebody who can help you. And if you feel like you're on a path where you're not getting the kind of help and support you need, you might need an IBCLC. An IBCLC is the clinical level of lactation management or breastfeeding management. And so, I like to say to my family, well, I'm the doctor of breastfeeding, and they laugh. But, in terms of when you're looking for breastfeeding support, if this level isn't helping, go to the next. And we all are here to help. So manage your expectations and go with it.
Thank you so much for these both insightful and kind words. This has been lovely.